Hey guys, Mr. Wilson here. Today we're going to talk about angle pair relationships. At the end of this video, you should be able to identify vertical angles, adjacent angles, complementary angles, and supplementary angles. And you should be able to use these relationships between the angle pairs to find missing information. Okay, there are 4 types of angle pairs we will look at in this lesson. Most of them have special relationships that will be used to find missing information. First is adjacent angles. These are 2 angles with a common vertex and a common side. Okay, so notice here, I'm just going to label some points so that we have them. Cake. Alright, so notice that we have the common vertex, that A is the vertex of both angle A and angle B. And they both have this ray, AK. Okay, so that's why they are adjacent angles. They share a vertex, they share a side, that AK. Okay, vertical angles are 2 angles whose sides form a pair, form 2 pairs of opposite rays. In other words, these angles are opposite one another when 2 lines cross or intersect. I don't know either one. Okay, so here we see 2 lines cross or intersect. Angle here. Those angles are vertical angles. Okay, vertical angles are never adjacent. They are never adjacent. Notice that adjacent angles share a side. Vertical angles do not share a side. This angle is made up of these 2 rays. This angle is made up of these 2 rays. They do not have a common side. Okay, but vertical angles will be congruent. Vertical angles are always congruent. So notice that this is 133 degrees. Z in this case would also be 133 degrees. Okay, reasoning between that, or the reasoning for that, notice that these 2 angles, adjacent angles, they make up a straight line, right? Can you see it if I'm doing that? Okay, they make up a straight line, so we know that that's 180 degrees. So that means that this angle will be 47 degrees. Okay, make up 180. Now if I'm looking at these 2 angles, again, they make up a straight line. Okay, that means they must add up to 180 degrees. We already know that this has to be 47, so this would be 133. Okay, notice vertical angles then would have to be congruent. Okay, and another thing to notice that we have 2 pairs of vertical angles here. These 2 angles would also be vertical. This would be 47 degrees. Okay, so those are what vertical angles are. They're kind of across each other on the X. All right, complementary angles are 2 angles whose measures add up to 90 degrees. Supplementary angles are 2 angles whose measures add up to 180 degrees. So make sure you can differentiate between complementary and supplementary. Okay, both complementary angles and supplementary angles are sometimes adjacent. Okay, you can be complementary or supplementary without being adjacent. So in we got some cases illustrated down here. It says name the most specific angle pair being illustrated. So for number 1 we have 27 here, 63 here. When you add those together, that gives us 90. Because they are 90 degrees, they are complementary angles. Complementary. Okay, so they don't have to touch, they don't even have to be next to each other at all to be complementary. Just 2 angles that add up to 90 degrees. Looking at our diagram number 2, 1 and 3. Okay, 1 and 3, these are 1 and 3, they're not vertical, even though these do cross. They're not vertical angles because they're right next to each other. They share a side, and so that means they are adjacent angles. Okay, not only because they share a side, but they also share the vertex. Then it says angles 3 and 4. Well, now 3 and 4, here and here, they are across each other on that x. Those are vertical angles. Vertical angles. Okay, I'm going to add to 1 and 3 because you might have been like, oh, Mr. Middleton messed up. Well, maybe. They are adjacent angles. I don't know if it's the most specific angle pair. They are adjacent because they're touching each other. But they are also supplementary. Okay, and remember that because they make up a straight line, they have to add up to 180 degrees. So they are adjacent supplementary angles. And then for number 3, I'm going to assume that I'm going to add this to the picture because I want it to be that way. Okay, angle A and B. Where am I supposed to do it? I guess I'm not supposed to do it. All right, you'd be tempted, just as I was tempted, to call these two right angles because, complementary because it looks like it should be 90 degrees. Okay, but there's no indication that that's 90 degrees. So all we can say about these two is that they're adjacent. There's nothing that says they should be 90. But if this was a 90 degree angle, they did tell us that was 90 degrees, then we could say that they were complementary as well. But they didn't. They didn't tell us that. All right. On to the back side. Backside says use the figure below to answer the questions. Name a pair of adjacent angles. There are a bunch of pairs of adjacent angles, but we can just name any pair. So adjacent angles have to share a vertex and a side. I'm going to say that angle M in L and angle L in K are a pair of adjacent angles. They share the side in L. They share the vertex in. They're right next to each other. Okay, name a pair of vertical angles. Okay, again, I'm looking for that cross. I see the two lines cross here. I have a pair of vertical angles here and here. So I and J, and angle M and L. Okay, name a pair of supplementary angles. These are angles that add up to 180 degrees. And so I'm looking for a straight line. I see a straight line here, right? And so I want to call this angle J in L, angle J in L, and angle L in M. Okay, so these two angles together make up a straight line. And then finally, I'm going to name a pair of complementary angles. I need to see 90 degrees somewhere. I see that here. I'm not just imagining it or wanting it to be there. So I have angle I and J, and angle J and K. Okay. All right, relationships. We will now look at some theorems concerning these angle pairs. Theorems are statements that can be proven. Theorems are statements that can be proven. So we're going to look at these theorems. So vertical angles are congruent. Congruent. Okay, so now we can start with our statements. And typically you'll start with the given statement, and be the case here. Angle 1 and angle 2 are vertical angles. Alright, and that's given. Now here I can see that 1 and 3 make up a straight line, and 2 and 3 make up a straight line, and so I can, the same reasoning, say that angle 1 plus angle 3 should equal 180, and angle 2 plus angle 3 should equal 180. Let's call that angle addition postulate. Okay, since those two angles together make up 180 degrees, or make up a straight line, I know they equal 180 degrees. Okay, some people call those angles linear pairs, two angles that make up a straight line. Alright, now what I can do is I can actually say that angle 1 plus angle 3 should equal angle 2 plus angle 3. Because I just said that they equal the same thing, so I'm substituting now. And now I can say that if I subtract angle 3 from both sides, then I'm just left with angle 1 equaling or being congruent to angle 2. Okay, and that will be subtraction property of equality. Alright, so there we have it. That's how we can prove that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. Different way. Alright, so number 2. And you want to prove it this way rather than what we showed earlier, just because what we showed earlier is a really specific case, and proving it this way shows that it's, in general, true. It's true all the time. We proved it without having specific numbers assigned, means that we can do it in any case. Alright, so number 2, congruent supplement theorems. If two angles are supplements of the same angle, or of congruent angles, then the two angles are congruent. So we could use that here as well. We could say, hey, angle 1 and angle 2 are supplements of angle 3. Must mean that they are congruent. Congruent complements angles is if two angles are complements of the same angle, or of congruent angles, then the two angles are congruent. Again, same thing, same concept now. Instead, now we're talking about complementary angles rather than supplementary angles. Our fourth theorem or relationship says that all right angles are congruent, which makes sense because in order for angles to be right angles, they have to be 90 degrees. And then finally, if two angles are congruent and supplementary, they're congruent and supplementary, means they add up to 180 degrees, then each of those angles is a right angle, which makes sense because supplementary means adds up to 180, congruent means it's the same, 180 divided by 2 is 90. Okay, so here's some relationships with angles and angle pairs that you have to be able to recognize. You should be able to recognize adjacent angles, vertical angles, complementary angles, supplementary angles, and then be able to know why they are what they are. All right, see you guys.